You know, many years ago in the Army, I attended a school called Air Assault School, right? And it was a couple weeks long, and basically it was a school that taught us how to operate in, around, and with helicopters. Okay, so that's kind of what Air Assault School is all about. And the final event of this school was a 12-mile road march. And so we had to walk down a road, it had it all mapped out, and you had to walk carrying a rifle and wearing your combat harness and carrying a rucksack with a certain amount of stuff in it, and you had to complete this last task in a certain amount of time. All right, I think it was 3 hours, but don't hold me to that, something like that. And what would happen when you finished, they had a line drawn across a gravel road, and there's the cadre, the NCOs are standing there with a little stopwatch, and when you finished in time, they'd say, all right, go on over there, have a seat in that field, drink some water, square your uniform away, because after the 3 hours was up, shortly after that, we were all going to get together in a formation, and we were going to march not very far away to a big stadium. And in that stadium was the generals and the colonels, and the division band was there, and wives and girlfriends and family were there. And it's a big ceremony where you graduate from Air Assault School and they give you these little wings. And it's like, yay! All right, so we all knew as soon as we completed that last task, that 12-mile road march in time, we were good to go. But when the 3-hour point came, these same NCOs, they took a barrier, you know, I think they call them a knife rest, and they put it across the road because there's still people coming in. They didn't make the time happen. They didn't meet the standards. And so they're waiting there, and we're all sitting over there, and as these people come in, and they come running in, and they're like, go on over there, have a seat, drink some water, and we'll have an NCO come over there and talk to you in a minute. These people failed. They knew they failed, right? And they knew they weren't going to be able to go to the graduation ceremony that was getting ready to start. And so they're sitting over there, feeling horrible. We're sitting over here feeling awesome because we are as good as got our air assault wings. All right? That story has something to do with today's sermon. Today's sermon deals with a very similar situation, and today's sermon is called Abraham's Bosom. Now, the verses we're going to cover on the back of your program, we're going to be in Luke chapter 16. And you can turn there. Now you will remember that earlier in Luke, Christ was saying, Yeshua HaMashiach was saying that you cannot serve God and mammon. You can't have it both ways. And he was talking to the Pharisees, and they were unhappy, right? And you'll remember that they derided him. They treated that with derision because they were very covetous people, and basically they were giving Jesus a bunch of garbage for that saying that he just said, that you can't serve God and mammon. But that doesn't faze our Lord and Master when these men of renown, right, these Pharisees, they're high up in society, when they don't treat him with respect. He says, y'all are they which justify yourselves before men, but Yah knows your hearts. He knows that, those things that are highly esteemed among men, among people, those things are considered an abomination by God. All right, so that's what he told them. Now, continuing with that thought and skipping ahead a couple verses, we turn to Luke chapter 16, verse 19. And what's going to happen here is, remember, he's keeping that same thought, and now Yeshua's going to tell a story. So let's look at that story, starting in verse 19. There was a certain rich man, which was clothed in purple and fine linen, and fared sumptuously every day. And there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, which had laid at his gate full of sores, and desiring to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. And it came to pass that the beggar died, and he was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom, and the rich man also died and was buried. And in hell he lifted up his eyes, being in torments, and sees Abraham afar off, and Lazarus in his bosom. And he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember that thou in thy lifetime received thy good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things. But now he is comforted, and thou art tormented. And besides all this, between us and you, there is a great gulf fixed, so that they which would pass from hence to you cannot, neither can they pass to us that would come from thence. And then he said, I pray thee therefore, Father, that thou wouldest send him to my father's house. For I have 5 brethren, that he may testify unto them, lest they also come into this place of torment. Abraham said unto him, They have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. And he said, Nay, Father Abraham, but if one went unto them from the dead, they will repent. And he said unto him, If they hear not Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, though one rose from the dead. So that's the story. Now this is a story. It's not a parable. This is a real guy that Jesus is talking about. His name is Lazarus. And he doesn't do that in any other parables. He doesn't name somebody. All right, so this is a true story. And Lazarus is not just any man. Lazarus is a man. That's not the Lazarus that we read about that Yeshua rose from the dead. It's not the same guy. Lazarus comes from Eleazar, and it means help of God. And so, who more, if you just kind of go with this line of thinking, who more needs the help of God but somebody who's poor, especially in those conditions, when the poor were down and out, right? So they understand they need the help of God. That's Eleazar, and in the New Testament, transliterated into the Greek, it's Lazarus. Okay, so let's look at this story. There was a certain rich man, which was clothed in purple and fine linen, and he fared sumptuously every day. He ate great food every day. So what's wrong with that? It's no sin to be rich. It's no sin to wear fine clothes. You know, real fine clothes, not these. But it's not a sin. It's not a sin to eat well. Right? You can eat well. That's not in and of itself a sin. We don't read here that this rich man obtained his possessions, that he gained his position in society by cheating people, by being one of those nasty tax collectors. We don't read that. We don't read that he used force or that he used deceit to get his riches. All right? But we don't read that about the guy. For all we know, this guy, worked hard and earned all the money that he has. The purpose of this story is not to illustrate that wealth is evil. Right? That's not the purpose of this story. Wealth is not in and of itself evil. The purpose of this story is to show that even wealthy people who have it all going on, are subject to the wrath of the Most High God. Even they. So they can think they all got it going on, but they too can be subject to Yahweh's wrath. It's also to show that, unlike, I think, the Puritans believe this, wealth does not necessarily show that one has God's favor. Right? It's like, I'm rich because God wants me to be rich. Maybe. Maybe not. The world rewards its own. Right? Satan has power in this world, and there's a lot of people out there that are super rich that have nothing to do with y'all's blessings on. And so that's not what this is about. Luxury, you remember I was talking earlier about you go away for a while, you go live in the swamp, you come back and having things like electricity is really cool, hot and cold water, that's a luxury. Do you know the poorest person here, and I don't know who that is, take the kids out of it, the poorest adult here is richer than most people in the world. I mean, incredibly richer, and you have more going on in your life than most people in the world. All right, so we all have luxury. And a problem with luxury is that we can get used to it, and that we can start having the sin of pride, which is like, I've got all this luxury because what I did. And we don't give praise to the Most High. That's a problem, and that can be dangerous. There's nothing wrong with living well. There's nothing wrong with having nice clothes. There's nothing wrong with eating well. I didn't say eating, 1,000 calories every 3 hours, but there's nothing wrong with eating well. But we have to be careful that we don't succumb to pride and things like that, sins in our life because of our riches. And we have to be careful that we don't misplace our priorities and start chasing after mammon instead of Yahweh. Okay, so in this case, the sin of the rich man is not being rich. That's not his sin. His sin is that he only thinks about himself, and he doesn't think about anybody else. In this case, that poor guy who's laying there dying at his front driveway, at the front of his gate. Okay, verse 20. And there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, which was laid at his gate full of sores, and desiring to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. And so, here's Lazarus, right? Poor Lazarus. He is in a terrible state. He is collapsed at the guy's gate. It's like we lived in Malaysia in a house with, 10-foot high walls with glass and barbed wire on them, and we had a big gate. And on the inside of the walls was safe and nice and, a little bit of America right there in this third world country. And on the outside of those walls was chaos and poor people and disease and nastiness. And so I can kind of understand the perspective here. There's this guy laying out at his gate, all right? And he's on the verge of dying. He's starving, and he's covered with sores. This guy's in a terrible state. And he's lying right outside, I think of it as the driveway. And so he's starving. Now, he is not asking, Lazarus is not asking to be let in to sit at the rich guy's table who fared sumptuously, right? And partake of the Thanksgiving dinner that's being served. He's not asking for that. Lazarus is not asking that, hey, could you just make me a sandwich and throw some mashed potatoes and some gravy in there and send that out to me so I can just go eat down here in the corner? He's not even asking for that. What Lazarus desires, what he wants, is the crumbs that fall off the rich guy's banquet table that staff comes and sweeps up and tosses out in the trash. Right? That's all this guy Lazarus wants. It's just some crumbs because he's starving. But he doesn't get that. The rich man does not even give him that. Right? He can't be bothered. He doesn't even probably notice poor Lazarus sticking out there. And moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. This rich man does not come out and treat Lazarus' sores. He doesn't, put ointment on it and bandage it or anything. He doesn't send one of his people, because if you're rich, in this context, you've got people. He doesn't send one of his people, one of his staff out there to take care of Lazarus. He's not like the Good Samaritan. He doesn't pay for somebody else to watch over poor Lazarus. And the dogs, this guy's dogs, all right, he can afford to keep more than one dog. And that's nothing about Americans. How many people here have a dog? Everybody, almost, right? That's a sign of wealth. That's a sign of wealth. So we don't really think of it in those cases. You are paying to feed an animal, right? You're paying to feed a dog. Most people here don't have highly trained, guard dogs that are a useful tool, and they just have dogs that you like, right? And so this guy has dogs. He pays to feed his dogs, and they come out and they lick the wounds of poor, starving Lazarus. Now, in Vietnam, during the Vietnam War, before most of you guys were born, American POWs were kept in captivity by the North Vietnamese, and many of them spent much of their day in steel shackles and steel shackles on their feet too, so on their wrists and on their feet, chained up so they couldn't escape. And it's a hot, humid, jungly journey environment, and so that it would wear through their skin, kind of like the trigger bites on my ankles, and they would get these horrible infections. I mean, just terrible, like infections you guys don't see. And the Vietnamese didn't take care of them. They didn't give them medicine. One, they didn't have a whole lot of medicine to share with the mostly American pilots who were bombing them. And two, they really didn't care about them. And what they learned was that if a dog came and licked your sores, it made your sores better. In the absence of bacitracin, triple antibiotic ointment, and things like that, they learned that dogs licking your sores made it better. They learned a couple things, tips and techniques that they could use, but that was one of them. But in this case, suffice it to say, the dogs come out and they lick Lazarus's wounds. And here's the thing. The dogs are nicer to Lazarus than the rich man is. They're taking care of him. They're dogs, and they're taking care of poor Lazarus. I just thought that was kind of interesting. What's the greatest commandment? Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and all thy mind, and all thy soul, and love your neighbor like yourself. There's not a whole lot of love going on here for poor Lazarus. Okay, verse 22. And it came to pass that the beggar died and was carried away by the angels into Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried. Now they both died. Okay, they both died. But Sister Kate and I lived in Northern Virginia. Northern Virginia is a lot like some parts of California in that there's a lot of wealth there. All our neighbors up and down the street, nice tree-lined street, brick houses. You know, we had a 5-bedroom house when we lived there. Everybody has Mercedes, Saab turbos. They're nice. Right? It's a nice neighborhood. There's a lot of money. Everybody has lots of toys. Everybody's got ATVs that they take out to the country and ride, you know, twice a year. And they've got bicycles and they've got just stuff. And there was a bumper sticker that I saw on a car one time. And it kind of summed up the attitude of a lot of Northern Virginia. And it said, "He who dies with the most toys wins." Right? So it's like the pursuit of consumerism and buying stuff. I saw another bumper sticker years later. It said, "He who dies with the most toys still dies." Check it out. Right? You can't take it with you. It puts things in perspective. The beggar dies first. The poor guy dies first. You know what? Sometimes good people die, and the wicked people remain right here. Sometimes that happens. We don't perceive that in our human brain as fair, but here's the deal. The beggar went to a nicer place. He really did. I've done several funerals now. And I really try to avoid the trite phrase because it comes out of everybody. He or she is in a better place now. The grieving people don't really want to hear that. And typically their faith is not that deep that people have had to deal with. Because the reality is if our loved one who is in Yeshua dies, we should be happy. I mean, we should really be happy for them. If we truly love them and care about their well-being more than our own, we should be happy because they are in a much better place. That's what we're fixing to see. I know we can cry because we miss them and that kind of thing, but it's not just a trite phrase. So he goes to a better place. Now, look what happens to this poor beggar after he slips these mortal bonds, right? After he dies and leaves this meat and bones back here on earth. Angels pick him up and carry him to Abraham's bosom. We're going to get to that phrase here a little bit. Angels who are ministering spirits to the saints, right? They take care of us. They're God's messengers. It's more than one. It's a couple, at least. It's a plural word. Angels pick him up and take him. They carry him. They escort him. It's almost like a guard of honor. You know, I've done a lot of funerals and I've participated in holding the flag, so has Brother Cole, on Fort Leavenworth. And when they bury somebody at the cemetery there on Fort Leavenworth, a fallen soldier, they have this organization called the Patriot Guard, and there's a bazillion motorcycles that ride in front like an escort. And that was kind of a response to that idiot that lives in the other part of Kansas that just kind of goes crazy and affects people's funerals. But it's an escort and a guard of honor. And he is returned, his spirit is returned because your spirit doesn't die. The spirit that you have right now is an eternal spirit, right? It doesn't die, and his spirit is returned to the Father. Now, The Jews, and this is the context in which the story is being told, they expressed, remember how I said we should be happy for people who died who are in Yeshua? Well, when someone died a righteous death, when someone righteous died, they expressed the happiness of that in three ways. One way was that they said, hey, they're going back to the Garden of Eden. Right? It was a phrase they used, a concept they used. Another. Ow! So they're going back to the Garden of Eden. Another one was that they were going to be under the throne of God. All right, so it was like a concept of where they're going. And then the third concept was, quite frankly, that they were going to be in Abraham's bosom. It's how they phrased it. Now, Yeshua is using that third example, Abraham's bosom. And just to cut to the chase on that, it doesn't mean this part of it. It's like a hug in his lap, in his protective arms, in his embrace, right? The embrace of Abraham. And it's a nice, safe place. And so that's the example that Yeshua is using. Because you see, the Jews understood, the Israelites understood, and we all understand that we are the seed of Abraham. You're either a direct lineal descendant, blood-born, grafted into the tree, or you're blood-born in the tree, or you're grafted in. Right? Either way, you're a descendant of Abraham. You're the seed of Abraham, and so you're returning to him. He is our father in that sense, if you will, the father of many nations, right? And he's there waiting for us in heaven when we get there. Not St. Peter at the pearly gates, right? There's no biblical support for that. And so that's where that's kind of coming from, that concept. In Matthew chapter 8, we can read this, Matthew 8:11. Yeshua says, "And I say unto you that many shall come from the east and from the west, and shall sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the children of the kingdom," this is the worldly kingdom this time, "shall be cast out into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Now, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot for the future going on there. But just for this part, what we're trying to get to is that they're going to sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, here we see poor old Lazarus. He's not so poor anymore. He's welcomed, right? He's not laying at the gates in his miserable state. He's welcomed in. He's not left to the dogs. And he's welcomed into the bosom, the lap, the embrace of Abraham. A nice, safe place. It's a place of comfort, a place of peace, and a place of joy where Lazarus now is. And he was escorted there by angels. As that was verse 22, and it came to pass the beggar died, and he was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. Look at this next part. The rich man also died and was buried. Okay, it's like Lazarus, he dies, he gets this angelic escort, and it says the rich guy dies and he's buried. Lazarus was born, was carried to Abraham's bosom. Where'd the rich guy go? Let's look at that. Verse 23. And in hell, he lifted up his eyes, being in torments, and he sees Abraham, this is the rich guy, afar off, and Lazarus in his bosom. So he's in hell, he's in Hades, right? That's the word. It's a place separate for the souls, if you will, that don't die in righteousness at this time. And it's a place where they are in the utmost misery and agony and just schlecht. It's just terrible, right? It's a terrible place to be, and it's not getting any better. All right, that's where they are. And just as the souls of those who die in righteousness, all right, and this is at this time, they're out of this burden of this old, broken, and in Lazarus' case, starving, sore-covered body, and boom, they're in the presence of the Most High. We're getting there. They're full of joy and goodness. The bad people, the unsanctified souls, if you will, they're transported immediately to this other place, this place of misery. And here's the part that's not so good for them also. Not only is it a terrible place, not only is it a place of terribleness without end, they can look right over there and see what they're missing. And like that story I told in the beginning, they can see how it could have been for them, but the bad thing is it's too late at this point. Verse 24, and he cried and he said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me and send Lazarus that he may dip the tip of his finger in the water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. Oh, please, 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 just one drop of water. I find it interesting that the rich man doesn't say, could you just give me one drop of water, Abraham? He's obviously given Abraham hierarchy, right? Why doesn't he just say, just give me one drop of water? Instead he says, hey, could you send Lazarus over here to give me a drop of water? There's a line of thought among some Jewish scholars about this whole concept, and they didn't believe in Yeshua, but it was the same kind of, they had similar stories. And it was basically this. Some people think that the rich guy, when Lazarus went to give him water, wanted to grab him and yank him in there, right, out of jealousy. Right? And what's that word that starts with the C? Covetousness, right? Which is what Yeshua was talking to the Pharisees about anyway, and keep him over on the bad side. Thing is, you can't do that, right? You can't get over there. But Abraham said, Son, remember that thou in thy lifetime received thy good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things. But now he is comforted, and thou art tormented. Hey, son, that kind of hurts too. Because see, he was a child of Abraham. He just went the wrong way. He goes, hey, you got what you were getting in that world. All right? Lazarus, he didn't get anything in that world. And now the tables have turned. Not so good for you, huh? I mean, there's not a lot of sympathy there on Abraham's part if you look at what he's saying. Nothing but pain where he is. Verse 26, and besides all this, between you and us, between us and you, there is this great gulf fixed, so that they which would pass from hence to you cannot, and neither can they pass to us that would come from thence. It's too late. The gulf is too big. You can see across it, but you can't cross it. Once you're dead, there's no more choice. Last week I spoke about Babylon and the end times. And you might want to turn to Revelation chapter 14. Revelation 14, verse 8. And there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all the nations to drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast in his image, and receive the mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. Here's why we're here. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb, and the smoke of their torment ascends up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, who worship the beast in his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. In the presence of the Lamb, right? They can see each other. Some people are happy. Some people are very unhappy. Just like in our story that we're reading in Luke, we can look here in Revelation, and we can see that those who don't have the testimony of Yeshua, those who aren't keeping his commandments, right? Those in this case who are receiving the mark of the beast, they're tormented forever in the presence of Yeshua and his angels, the Lamb and his holy angels. So that's so-called New Testament, right? New Testament looking at it. Let's look back and see if New Testament hooks up with the Old Testament. How many people think it will? It will. Let's go to Isaiah 66. Isaiah chapter 66, verse 22. Isaiah 66, 22. For as the new heavens and the new earth which I will make shall remain before me, saith Yahweh, so shall your seed and your name remain. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Shabbat to another, shall all flesh come worship before me, saith Yahweh. And they shall go forth and look upon the carcasses of the men that have transgressed against me, for their worms shall not die, neither shall their fire be quenched, and they shall be an abhorring unto all flesh. So it looks like keeping Yah's law, remaining in covenant with Him, is a really important thing for us to do. It has eternal consequences for us. Back to Luke 16, back to the rich man that's in Hades. He says, all right, look, okay, got it. If I can't have just one drop of water on my burning tongue, okay, I get that. If I can't just get one smidgen of relief, how about, verse 27, then he said, I pray thee therefore, Father, that thou wouldest send him, Lazarus, to my father's house, for I have 5 brethren, that he may testify unto them, lest they also come into this place of torment. He's saying, now that I see how terrible this is, now that I understand the torment that results from the decisions I made, can you just send him to talk to some people that I care about, some people that I love, so they can avoid the mistakes that I made? All right, so now he cares about somebody else. Verse 29, and Abraham says unto him, they have Moses and the prophets. Let them hear them. Do we have Moses and the prophets? We do, right? Do they, people out there, do they have Moses and the prophets? Is it available to them? In this country, it sure is. Right? Anybody who wants a Bible and can read what Moses and the prophets said, what God said through them, can do that. Those people have the ability to learn. That's what Abraham is telling them. They have Moses and the prophets. They have the ability to learn. They have the ability already to learn the things you didn't learn. All right, to avoid the results that you got for yourself, to avoid the mistakes you made. And you know what? It's the same thing today. We got Moses and the prophets right here. We have the ability to read. That's why we really need to teach our kids to read. That's the real reason. So they can read the Word. Right? We have that ability. Verse 30. And he said, nay, Father Abraham, that's not going to work, that Moses and the prophets thing. But if one went unto them from the dead, like Lazarus, they will repent. And he said unto him, this is Abraham speaking, if they hear not Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, though one rose from the dead. The rich man thinks that somebody coming back from the dead will convince them more than the Word of God. More than Torah, right? More than that, this person rising from the dead will convince them. But Abraham says, no. If the Moses and the prophets don't convince them, somebody rising from the dead isn't going to convince them. Who's telling the story? Yeshua. Yeshua's telling the story. Yeshua rose from the dead. And you know what? There's people out there right now who still don't get it. There's a whole bunch of people tomorrow. Man, friends of mine, people who used to be my friends who no longer consider me their friend, but people who I still care deeply about, they're not getting Moses and the prophets. And it's right there. All right? It's right there for us. It's right there for them. Sister Kate was telling you guys that she gave praise today for a video we watched. She didn't really go into detail, but we watched the video. And it was a video that Pastor Dell did. And it was on 3 words. And one of those words was believe. Right? Believe and ye shall be saved. Well, that word means entirely different things in the context in which it was written and spoken, and the context that we read it today in 21st century America. See, we believe in a very European, based on the Greek way, which means we give mental assent to something. We're like, yep, that's right. I believe Jesus is the Son of God. He lived a perfect, sinless life. He died and rose again. You know what? That's not belief. The demons believe. They believe that. They know that, and they tremble. Right? This is not mental assent that we're talking about here. But they hear not Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded. You know, I have a lot of friends out there, and it saddens me the position they're in, because they think they believe, but they're not believing. All right. This is going long. We're going to sum this up. What's the bosom of Abraham? The bosom of Abraham was a place where the righteous who died went, all right, and they hung out for a bit right after they left their flesh bodies, because the spirit doesn't die. The dead sinners, when they died, they went to Hades, all right, and there's that gulf in between them, and they can see each other across it, but it's an insurmountable divide. Now, here's the deal. Before Yeshua came, and afterwards, I submit to you, but before he came, there were righteous people. They were righteous. They lived righteously. They lived holy. But you know what? They still sinned. They still committed sin. And those sins had to be paid for. And the only way those sins could be paid for was through the blood of Yeshua. Right? The blood of Jesus Christ. That was it. He hadn't shed his blood yet. When Jesus died, when Yeshua died, he was dead for 3 days. What did he do during those 3 days? Please turn 1 Peter chapter 3. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 18 is what we'll pick up. First Peter 3:18, for Christ also died for the sins once and for all, the just for the unjust. He was just, we are unjust. In order that he might bring us to God, having put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit. Look at verse 19. In which also he went and made proclamation to the spirits now in prison, who once were disobedient when the patience of God kept waiting in the days of Noah during the construction of the ark, in which a few, that is 8 persons, were brought safely through the water. Jesus went and he told these people in this prison, if you will, it's referred to here, who he was, what he did, gave them a chance to go, I believe, really believe, not just mental assent. And he rescued them from prison. You don't have to turn there, but Psalm 68:18 says this, thou hast ascended on high, thou hast led captivity captive. That means you have gone there and rescued the prisoners, if you will. Thou hast received gifts of men, yea, for the rebellious also, that Yahweh God might dwell among them. And so Yeshua, after his work on the cross, his work on the stake was done, he went and he let the righteous out of it, all right, into the Abraham's bosom. He led them away from there. Now, since his work has been done, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Father. We're going there. Right? If you die, you're going there if you die in Yeshua. And it kind of goes with the context of the story because it's hard for us to grasp sometimes. It's the story I told about Aristotle School. There's another concept that I thought of. When I travel with my work, they fly me business class, which is very nice of them. And a lot of the airports out there are not like MCI. It's not like Kansas City, which is a pretty nice airport, pretty normal-looking people walking around. You know, you get to Minneapolis, you get to San Francisco, you get to LA. It's kind of grungy, dirty, kind of in some of that airport. I mean, I tell you, it is. And so I get to the airport and I have a 5 or 6 or 7 hour layover sometimes, and it's like, I know I'm flying business class, and it's going to be sweet. and it's going to be comfortable, and they're going to give me sumptuous food and drink, and it's going to be joyful, it's going to be awesome. And I know I'm going there. But you know what? Right now I'm stuck in this airport. But check it out. I'm flying business class. So I get into the business class lounge, which is just like being on business class on the airplane. It's the same thing. Everything is wonderful and comfortable, and the temperature's nice, and it's quiet, and the people, treat you with dignity, I would say. Now, my flight has not yet taken off. Judgment has not yet happened. All right, to kind of start tying the two together, and yet I'm still in business class. Right? That Aerosol School story I told you about, hadn't really graduated yet, hadn't been awarded my wings yet, hadn't had the general go, "Congratulations, young man, I'm in," and I'm over here in the good seats. Okay, that's the similar thing that's going on today. Luke 12, we'll close with this. Luke 12, 4 and 5. "And I say unto you, my friends, be not afraid of them that kill the body, and after that have no more they can do. But I will forewarn you whom you shall fear. Fear him which after he is killed has the power to cast into hell. Yea, I say unto you, fear him."